Welcome to today's video, everybody. We're doing a deep dive into UPS 2976, and this preliminary report is a shocker. We've got fresh images of what happened with the engine basically flying off of this thing. But there's also precedence for this. So the report actually at the end, I'll talk to you about an incident that happened that was very similar that took down a jet as well. And that in that aircraft, hundreds of people died. In this one, we got 14 fatalities. Terrible just for this to happen again. Very unfortunate. But we're going to talk about what might be the cause of this. And I'll get to that at the end. I'll give you my unhold, I will not hold anything back, and I will give you my full perspective on what I think went on. I'm an airline pilot. I've flown the 737, the A220. I've flown a lot of military aircraft as well. But let's dive right into this preliminary report. And it's basically kind of a shocking situation, guys. But I want to step through it in a logical pattern, and I'll talk about some of the technical stuff, and I'll try to make it as understandable as I possibly can, okay? I'm a simple man, and I want to make this a simple video that helps get this information across. So November 4th, 2025, if you haven't heard, that MD-11F airframe, that went down, and it only climbed to about 30 feet. So it got a takeoff roll, a lot of smoke coming from that engine, and then it only got about 30 feet off the ground until it smacked into buildings at the end of the runway and created a massive fireball. But this is what the MD-11 looks like. This is a FedEx MD-11. So good looking aircraft, however, dated, very dated, decades old aircraft. 3 engine setup, right? So you got engine 1 here, you got engine 2 on the back, and then engine 3 on the right-hand side. These are freighters. There's another type of aircraft called the DC-10 that looks very similar to this that's been converted to freighters. And now this MD-11, basically all it does is freighters. I don't believe any other airlines are flying this with passengers right now. So at least we got that going for us, right? At least passengers aren't risking their lives on these things. But again, older aircraft, probably a lot of outdated systems that we need to look at, and we'll get into that in the preliminary report. But I wanted to just give you guys a quick view. There's a UPS one right there. So this is pretty much the exact incident aircraft. MD-11F, 3 engine setups. That shows you the aircraft, and it's just, it's a beast for hauling, but it's an outdated beast, and we're going to get to why here in a second. But all aircraft require a lot of maintenance, so that's something to keep in mind as I go through this report as well. And then the NTSB releases these things roughly 30 days after, so they're ahead of the game. Again, just class act from what I've seen from the NTSB, which is just super refreshing. I love it. When you compare it, what happened in India to that 787 that went down, and it took them months to even get us a couple pieces of paper on the incident, and then they didn't even do a press conference. So I'm just really proud of our NTSB, and I want to throw that out there. It helps the flying public feel reassured that there is a body, there's an organization that's looking out for us and keeping us safe. So well done, tip of the hat to the NTSB. Keep it coming, appreciate you. But yep, so they're going to give a quick overview here of why they're doing this investigation, what the actual incident was, and where the aircraft was headed to. It was headed to Hawaii, and then they're going to talk about the CVR. So cockpit voice recorder, flight data recorder. So voice recorder is going to record the cockpit communications between ATC and the pilots. FDR, that's going to record the actual attitude, speeds of the aircraft, and how it's actually maneuvering through the airspace. And then it gives a little history of the flight. And this is where things get spicy, okay? This is where the images really tell us exactly what went on. So I'm going to read a little bit, but more so I'll just kind of be interpreting for you. So here we go. The taxi and takeoff roll were uneventful until the airplane rotated for takeoff. And then the airport surveillance videos of the airplane showed the number 1 engine and pylon separating from the wing shortly after rotation. Okay, so we got here rotations happening, image number 1. Shortly after rotation, it just breaks off like a freaking Lego. It breaks off, guys. Just kind of maddening there as an aviator, having flown airliners. It's just maddening to see something like this happen. This should not be happening. Okay, I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm just a little bit heated about it because obviously some brothers of mine, airline, cargo, it's a very tight-knit community. So to lose aviators and then to lose people on the ground because of this is unacceptable. I'm just going to start with that. But I'll keep going here. So the engine and pylon separating from the wing shortly after airplane rotation, right there, number 2, with a fire ignition on the left engine, obviously, because a lot of fuel is shooting into that engine. So when the engine's gone, the fire is going to continue because of all the vibration, the sparks that are going to fly off as that metal shreds. It's going to ignite that jet fuel every single time. I mean, it's a no-brainer on why that's going to happen. But the left engine traversed above the fuselage and subsequently impacted the ground. And yeah, we can see that. A fire ignited near the left area pylon attachment to the wing, which continued until ground impact, obviously. So that's going to progress here. Number 3, we see the fire starting. And then number 4, something they don't talk about is, I mean, the engine is way up in the air and it's close to the number 2 engine, which is here on the tail. So it's not discussed in this because, again, it's a preliminary report. They're not trying to give us every single bit of information. However, the engine being right up there with sparks flying out of it, fuel, fan blades, metal, the shrouds around the engine are going to fly up. And in my opinion, that's going to cause a compressor stall in the number 2 engine. But you can kind of see that how the pandemonium is happening right here. Again, just completely unacceptable from a maintenance perspective. But we'll talk about that here in a second a little bit more. But number 5, okay, you see the engine as it continues its toss, and then the aircraft is just basically doomed at this point. It starts that wing left, the wing down a little bit. The first officer is going to be flying this aircraft, so the first officer's on the right side of the plane. So the first officer is going to feel that wing dip and try to counter it. However, we don't know what the damage is to the flight controls and the thrust. Again, if you have one engine, just that right engine, in a super heavy situation like this where you're taking off, you've got tons of cargo, tons of gas, I just don't think it's going to have the power to climb out on that one right engine. But as you can see, number 5, the wing dips down, the fire continues, the engine's still in the frame. That's just insane to see. It's just shocking, honestly. And then number 6, you see the fireball kind of consuming towards the back aft end of the aircraft. And again, just puts the pilots in a position where they have a no-win scenario. They're painted into a corner at this point without the thrust. So it says the airplane initially climbed, but it did not get higher than about 30 feet above ground level. It cleared a blast fence, and then a main landing gear is going to impact a UPS facility at the end of the runway, and then it's going to impact a storage yard and additional buildings and a petroleum recycling facility, and it's all consumed by fire. We've seen those images. We've seen the drone footage, the helicopter footage of the area, and this is just a depiction of it going into that UPS facility, striking the gear, and then the flight track shows where it's going to impact, direction of travel. And yeah, we got the aerial view here. Crew experience. So this is something that's always in these investigative reports. Again, RIP to the crew. Thoughts and prayers with their family and friends. Again, this should not have happened. And we'll get to that here in a second. The captain who is the pilot monitoring. So the pilot that's watching, observing, backing up the FO. And then you just rotate on different flights. That's what you do. So he held an airline transport pilot certificate with a type rating for the MD-11. The captain had accumulated 8,600 total hours of flight experience, of which 4,900 were in the accident plane. So a ton of experience in the MD-11. The first officer who was flying held an airline transport pilot certificate as well, type rated for the MD-11. The FO had accumulated 9,200 hours of total flight experience as reported to the FAA. 994 were in the accident airplane, so relatively experienced. To get what's called vested in an aircraft, you really need about 100 hours, 120 hours, and that's when you're on a bit of a probationary period. Like you need to get about 100 hours within 2 months to make sure that all your training is cemented in actual flying. So well past that. So very experienced crew. And then the relief officer, so the third pilot, so on long legs like this, there's a relief pilot who's an FO, likely an FO, but they have the relief position, so they're not flying as much. They just come in for the breaks. And they had accumulated 15,200 total flight hours as reported to the FAA, of which 8,775 were in the accident airplane model. So very experienced crew. Again, put in a situation where it was a no-win. They didn't have the opportunity. But we got the recorders, talks about those. It recorded, so they've got everything recorded. Just to kind of give you guys a quick brief of that. FDR, CVR looks like they worked. And they've got all the data on them, so those have obviously already been reviewed. But that information isn't really recorded in this preliminary report. And then you got the airplane and operator information. We kind of talked about that already. But this is where it gets really technical, okay? This is where, and I'm going to try to, in my best possible effort, make this simple for me. Again, I need it simple for me. I'm a pilot, I need things to be simple. So here we go. Left engine and the right engine. So left engine's number 1, the tail engine's number 2, right engine is number 3, okay? they're attached to the underside of pylons that are in turn attached to each wing, right? That makes sense. The center number 2 engine is attached to the base of the vertical stabilizer. So let me show you that. So this is the vertical stabilizer, and this is attached to the base. This is the number 1 engine. It's attached to a pylon, and then this is the number 3 engine, and it's attached to a pylon as well. And I'll jump back to this graphic if we need it. So the left and right pylon attaches to their respective wing via a forward mount bulkhead. So think of just like extra hardware that it's needed for a thrust link assembly and an aft mount bulkhead. For simplification, the report will refer to these bulkheads as the forward mount and the aft mount. Okay, so there's a forward mount and an aft mount on this pylon. All right, pylon, forward mount, aft mount. Okay, and again, I like things to be simple, so that's my goal. I like that they simplified that. That's good. And then the thrust link assembly located immediately behind the forward mount's lower spherical bearing, stay with me, transmits thrust loads. All right. So primarily transmits those thrust loads. So that's kind of a central point of when the thrust kicks on, that holds everything in position. The pylon aft mount is an assembly composed of 2 independent fittings that are bolted together, and this will be important here in a second, with a forward lug and an aft lug. And those house a single spherical bearing that's inside that forward and aft lug. And for this report, it'll be referenced to the pylon aft mount spherical bearing included both bearings ball elements. So there's 2 of these, but this one's going to be focused on referencing to the pylon aft mount spherical bearing. That's what's going to be the most important one here. And then a clevis on the underside of each wing connects the pylon aft mount via an attachment hardware. Okay, so sort of important, but here's kind of the depiction. I love pictures, so hopefully you guys love pictures as well. But this kind of helps us understand this aft lug and forward lug. This is what I want you guys to really focus on. This is what stood out to me most. Spherical bearing as well stands out, but aft lug, forward lug. Focus on that real quick, okay? Because I know it's a lot of information, and we'll keep stepping through here. So this is the aft lug here. This is the forward lug, okay? This is an exemplar installation. So this is how it should look, okay? This is the metal not having fatigue cracks. This is a solid looking one. This isn't the accident aircraft, okay? And then there's a bearing inside of there that's underneath that wing clevis section, okay? So again, 3 things I want you to focus on. Forward lug, aft lug, bearing, all right? Bearings inside of there, forward lug, aft lug. Ton of stress is put on this forward lug and aft lug. That's probably one of the most important points I want you to hold on to right now, okay? So it goes on to say the airplane was spread over a wide area, obviously, and here's where it gets wild. So we're seeing those images of that left engine fly off, right? Fragments of engine fan blades and separated pieces from the left engine were found on and adjacent to runway 17 right. So that's like obvious, all that's going to be right there on 17 right. Recovered portions were transferred. Yep. The left pylon aft mounts, forward and aft lugs were both found fractured near their 2 o'clock inboard and 9 o'clock outboard fractured position. Okay, so that's this right here. 2 o'clock position over here, 9 o'clock position over here. All right, so they found both of these fractured, right? And this is going to relate to that engine detaching from the aircraft. So we'll keep going. The fractured and separated upper portions of forward and aft lugs were found adjacent to runway 17 right. All right. So the fractured and separated upper portions. So this looks like the lower portions, but they're going to find the upper portions are going to be on the runway. So the upper portions are going to fly off with the engine. So that's kind of the big clue there. Okay. Let's see, the left wing clevis and aft mount spherical bearings and aft mount attachments hardware were found with a portion of the left wing at the accident site. So they kept going with the aircraft. So half of these attachments basically flew off with the engine and half kept going with the aircraft, okay? So that is a really big clue as to what we're going to get to here in a second, kind of what happened. The right engine remained attached to the right wing pylon, and both were found at the accident site. And basically the right engine doesn't seem to have a lot of issues here, from what I can tell. It says the right wing pylon to wing forward and aft mounts had separated from the right wing pylon, but were found about 87 feet from the right engine. So maybe some stresses on the right engine too. That could be relating, like, hey, maybe the right engine had some issues as well. But it says the right pylon aft mount remained attached to the right wing clevis, but it's going to smack the ground extremely hard. So it's probably hard for them to determine right now whether that right engine had issues as well. But the right engine remained attached, as we know, okay? So the separated left pylon after recovery and the left pylon's aft mounts, fractured forward and aft lugs, are on the right side. So as you can see, this is it going forward. These are both the same thing. Again, 2 o'clock position, broken. 9 o'clock position, broken. And then inside of this structure, we've got the spherical bearing. So the left wing clevis, fractured spherical bearing marked by the red brackets right here, and the associated attachment hardware found at the accident site. And then an exemplar one here to the right. So this is what it should look like. It should look very smooth like that. It's obviously got a ton of different fractures in there. So it's almost like it wasn't really, we don't know how much of that was caused by the actual crash, but it looks like metal fatigue, stresses. So not a good situation when it should look more like this, and we've got it looking like this, okay? Just, really unfortunate. Definitely not looking like the strong piece of metal that it needs to look like. That's kind of the key is there, okay? And then the left pylon aft mount fractured lugs from the left pylon aft mount and the left wing clevis were retained for further examination. Yep, obviously. So when you look at after initial cleaning of the fractured surfaces, examination of the left pylon aft mount lug fractures found evidence of fatigue cracks in addition to areas of overstress. Okay, so examination of the left pylon aft mount lug. So that's this one right here. Fatigue cracks. So before the actual overstress, and overstress is like the crash is happening, the engine's ripping off. They're going to find fatigue cracks in this, okay? And I think that's going to be one of the contributing factors, if not the root cause. So this is kind of bringing us to the summation of what's going on, okay? So they're going to find that, and on the aft lug, so it had overstress failures and fatigue cracks. On the aft lug, on both the inboard and outboard fractured surfaces, a fatigue crack was observed where the aft lug bore met the aft lug forward face. Got it. Okay, well, there we go. For the forward lug's inboard fracture surfaces, fatigue cracks were observed along the lug bore. For the forward lug's inboard. Okay, so there was a fatigue crack as well on the forward lug. For the forward lug's outboard fracture surface, the fracture consisted entirely of an overstress. Okay, so there were parts of the forward lug that had stress fractures, but then there's going to be, it looks like for the outboard fracture surface, the fracture consisted entirely of overstress. All right. So the overstress means the aft lug is going to start breaking away, and then that centrifugal force of that engine flying off is going to just totally destroy the forward lug. But there's going to be overstress fractures in that as well. So the forward top flange of the aft mount was examined for indications of deformation or pre-existing fractures, but no indications were found. The spherical bearing was removed from the wing clevis for further evaluation. Spherical bearing and attachment hardware are right here. So this is that spherical bearing. At the time of the incident, this is where we get into the maintenance and inspections. And I think, again, definitely strikes me when I hear about some of these inspections, and I'm not going to blame it all on the maintainers either. I mean, there's a chance that these inspections were delayed, or they basically were done in a fashion that kind of, maybe it's within the rules, but maybe they should have done a lot more often, but that's going to cost the company more money, okay? Let's just call a spade, all right? I want to be honest with you guys. They're doing it to the letter of the law, and that's what they'll come out and say, but when you're flying MD-11s that are old, maybe we need to update these inspections, guys, okay? So I'll just throw that out there as we go through this. So at the time of the accident, this aircraft had accumulated a total time of 92,992 hours and 21,000 cycles, takeoffs and landings. The accident airplane was maintained under a continuous airworthiness program. Camp, a review of the inspection task for the left pylon aft mount found both a general visual inspection, okay, so that's what's required, and a detailed visual inspection of the left pylon aft mount. But you guys could see those cracks and surfaces could happen inside that area where you can't see with your eyes. Required by UPS's maintenance program they found, one thing here is both a general visual inspection and a detailed visual inspection of the left pylon aft mount required by UPS's maintenance program at a 72-month interval was last accomplished on October 28th, 2021. What are we in now, guys? We're in 2025, 4 years. 4 years, and this is a visual inspection. They're not using thermal. They're not diving into it deeper with x-rays and things like that into that metal. It's basically just a general visual inspection and a detailed visual inspection. And maybe they've started doing thermal with those inspections. I don't know. If so, please tell me that. If someone's watching this from UPS, please tell me that you've been doing that. But it looks like it's been accomplished 4 years ago. Okay. Again, how old is this aircraft? 92,000 hours. We're going to do a visual inspection every 4 years. A 24-month, 4,800-hour lubrication task of the pylon thrust links and pylon spherical bearings was last accomplished on October 18th, 2025. Okay, so they did some lubrication tasks of the pylon thrust links, the links, and the pylon spherical bearing. So in here, just some lubrication. But they didn't need to do a visual inspection while they were in there because it was done 4 years ago. Do you guys see the issue here? So a special detailed inspection of the left pylon aft mount lugs would have been due at 29,200 cycles, so about 8,000 more takeoffs and landings. And of the left wing clevis support would have been due at 28,000 cycles. The accident airplane record showed that these two tasks had not been accomplished because the aircraft was only at 21,000 cycles. So it needed for the left pylon aft mount lugs to be inspected. That would need another 8,000 takeoffs and landings. Great. 8,000 takeoffs and landings late. And then for the left wing clevis support, that would have been due at 28,000 cycles. So there you go, guys. This, to me, shows that these inspections are not being done as often as they should be. We'll know more information as this goes on. Remember, there'll be a whole official investigation that'll play out. Safety actions. UPS has grounded their MD-11 fleets as precautionary measures, and it looks like all the other MD-11 fleets have been grounded as well. And then again, it's worth me saying, similar event, May 25th, 1979, American Airlines Flight 191. This is an image of it right here. It had basically the same exact thing happen. One of the flaps in the front locked out, couldn't maintain altitude, and it crashed and killed everybody on board. So it's the second time this has happened. So obviously the inspections, the maintenance needs to be redone. We got to do better maintenance and inspections on these. You got to use thermal imaging and way more often. Because again, the stress cracks in those lugs to me are the contributing factors, if not the root cause of this. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate you checking out this preliminary report. I'll keep you updated on this as this develops. Thanks so much for watching. And if you would, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, follow me on X, and then watch these videos right here. When you watch these videos, it helps the channel grow a lot, and I'll greatly appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.